Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 100 of Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Shabbis. I must tell you, Daf Lamed Ches does not disappoint. It is hard. Although, I think that it's not as hard as yesterday's page, but oh my gosh, it was hard to learn. Very, very hard to learn, but I think that to share it, I think isn't that difficult. So that's the good news. I think you guys will be okay. Very cool. Well, I'm not really going to do too much of an introduction right now. Just going to point out that the daf starts with what happens if you forget a pot on the fire from before Shabbos. So it's like a shehiyah, you forgot a forgotten shehiyah. So what happens? And then we're going to talk. The second one was going to talk about like chazara, like how exactly can you put stuff back in the stove. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to get on to a new Mishnah, kind of towards the end of the Amud. Without further adu, let's get started. Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis all the way at the bottom. They asked a kasha from Reb Chia bar Abba. Now Reb Chia bar Abba was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, said that Rabbi Chia bar Abba every 30 days would go over all of his learning in front of Rabbi Yochanan. This is Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So shachach chidei al gabi kira uvishlo b'Shabbos ma'u. So what happens if you forgot a pot on the fire, right, on the stove, okay, and it was cooking on Shabbos? Now, okay, first of all, I assume that it's not talking about, it's not talking about like, where you were just like cooking something on Shabbos. It's talking about where it was already cooked before Shabbos, right? Meaning, because we had the Mishnah on Daf Yud Test, which says that you can't cook before Shabbos unless there's enough time. So assuming that he did everything right, okay, there was enough time before Shabbos to cook, right? Just that he meant to take it off of the fire, and he forgot it on the fire, right? And then what happens is, right, so maybe it became like mitztamek v'yafilo, right? And there's a kasha, maybe mitztamek v'yafilo is not okay, right? So maybe it's already fully cooked before Shabbos, but you forgot to take it off the fire, and then it was getting better and better and better. So now you realize, like, oh shoot, and it's an hour later, or 2 hours later, whatever it might be, and you say, oh, I forgot to take the pot off the fire, and all the meantime, the food was getting better and better and better, and now you have this awesome food, but mitztamek v'yafilo isn't allowed. So, are you allowed to eat it or not? Or even if you say that it was, maybe cooked k'maychol ben dusai, okay? And so at least it was cooked enough before Shabbos, but you really should have taken it off of the fire before Shabbos. Now, this is, of course, assuming that you say that shehiyah wouldn't be allowed on on Shabbos. Now, I also assume that we're talking about a fire that is not grufa uktuma, right? Meaning, this is your fire. This is the fire that you're cooking on, right? It's a strong fire. This is what you need to cook on. You're not cooking with a weak fire that won't be able to cook. You're cooking with a strong fire, and you meant to take it off of the fire, but you forgot. And now you basically have shehiyah, right, on a stove that is not grufa uktuma. It's a good strong stove that you're cooking on, okay? So now, according to Rav Sheishes, or in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, or according to like the Chasuri Mechzer that we learned 2 days ago, that says that shehiyah on a stove that isn't grufa uktuma is fine, well then who cares? Shehiyah is completely fine, just take it off and eat it. The question is according to those opinions that say that shehiyah on something that isn't grufa uktuma is not allowed. So, you forgot it. Can you now eat the food? Can you not eat the food? So, ishtik v'lo ameliv lo midi. So Reb Chia bar Abba was quiet. He didn't say a thing. Okay. L'machar, the next day, nafak darish lu, he went out and he explained to them, hamavashal b'Shabbos b'shogeg, if somebody cooks on Shabbos b'shogeg, right, like mamish, like Shabbos morning, takes out the frying pan, makes an egg, by accident, yochal, you can eat it. But if he deliberately took out the frying pan and made an egg, then you wouldn't be able to eat it. Viloshna, and then he adds Viloshna. Okay, cryptic. So first of all, he's talking about Bishul. We're not talking about Bishul, we're talking about Shahiyah. And he says then Viloshna. And the question is, what does Viloshna mean? It makes no difference. What does it makes no difference mean? So my Viloshna. So what does Viloshna mean? So Rav and Rav Yosef Damatavayu Leatera. So Rav and Rav Yosef learn it makes no difference to mean, oh, okay, it makes no difference, just like if you accidentally cook an egg on Shabbos, or cook anything on Shabbos, you'd be allowed to eat it. Well, similarly here as well. You accidentally forgot the pot on the fire, you can eat it even though it continued to cook on Shabbos. And they explain themselves. Mivashlu d'ka'avid maise b'mezid lo yochal. Aval hai d'lo ka'avid maise b'mezid nami yochal. Because when it comes to cooking on Shabbos, taking out the frying pan and making an egg, that is where the Mishnah says, right? It's a Mishnah in Trumas that says that, b'mezid, if he took out the frying pan on purpose and cooked on Shabbos, he wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Although if he took out the frying pan on purpose and cooked on Shabbos, he probably doesn't care that he's not allowed to eat it, but that's a different story. So, but that's because he's doing a maise, because he's actually taking out the frying pan and cooking an egg. But over here, he's not doing a thing. He forgot about it, for crying out loud. It's the opposite of doing anything. So therefore, even if he did it on purpose, even if he intentionally just left it there on the fire, it would be acceptable. And certainly, in this case, when he forgot about it, it's fine. So, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said le'isura, whereas Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says that no, it's asur. What does it mean? Mivashalu delo asi le'iarume b'shogeg yochal. When it comes to cooking, as Rashi points out, because cooking is it's an isser, it's an av malacha, it's an isser d'oraisa, and Rashi says in the Dibra Maschil delo asi le'iarume, it says delo nechshudu Yisrael ala Shabbosos, that the Yidden are not suspect of being Mechal Shabbos, and therefore, we're going to assume that he's not simply going to take out the frying pan and cook on Shabbos on purpose. And therefore, if he did it, he's not going to sneakily just start cooking and then be like, oh yeah, it was an accident. No, we assume that, if it was an accident, it was an accident. But when it comes to leaving something on a fire, the asili arume, where, people might end up just kind of being dishonest about it. And Rashi points out because it's a din d'Rabbanan, so maybe it'll be more, Shahiyah is a din d'Rabbanan. The thing is already cooked after all. You're just leaving it on the fire. So over there, it might be kind of more makil, more lenient in their eyes, and people might, in fact, just kind of leave the fire on the fire and then be like, leave the pot on the fire and be like, oh, oops, I guess I forgot. And therefore, for that reason, even b'shogeg, you would not be allowed to eat it, according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So b'shogeg nami lo yochal. So here also, even b'shogeg, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Okay. So according to Rabbi and Rav Yosef, if you forgot the pot on the fire, so you would be allowed to eat it. And according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, if you forgot the pot on the fire, you would not be allowed to eat it. Meisvei. Now we have a kasha. Shachach kedera agabe kira. If a person forgot his pot on a stove, uvishla b'Shabbos, and it was cooking on Shabbos, b'shogeg yochal, if he does it by accident, he can eat it. B'mezid lo yochal. If he did it on purpose, he's not allowed to eat it. Okay. But when do we say this? B'chamen shelohu chamu kol tzarkan. That is talking about hot water that is not fully cooked, that is not boiling. V'tav shelo bishel kol tzarko, and cooked foods that are not completely cooked. Okay? They're cooked, but not completely cooked. Haval chamen shehu chamu kol tzarkan. However, if it's hot water that is completely boiled, or if it's a cooked food, cooked dish that is completely cooked, well then, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, yochal divrei Reb Meir. Then according to Reb Meir, you would be allowed to eat this hot water that's fully boiled and this cooked food that's fully cooked, even if you left it on the fire on purpose. Rabbi Yehuda says regarding fully cooked items, that hot water that's completely boiled, mutarin, you would be allowed to, leave it even if it was on purpose. Because the longer you cook it, the worse it gets. Or at least it doesn't get better, right? It makes no difference the longer you cook the hot water. If anything, it evaporates. However, a food that is completely cooked, then if you left it there intentionally, it would not be allowed. Or even by accident. I don't know. You wouldn't be allowed to cook it because you wouldn't be allowed to eat it because it would be better. The longer it stays on, the better it gets. And whenever something, the longer it stays, the better it gets. Kigon kruv ufulim uvsar, right? Such as cabbage or beans or kind of like pulled meats, I guess. Osir, it would be allowed. And anything that's mistamik viralo, anything that the longer it kind of cooks and the more shriveled and raisiny it gets, it's bad for it, then it would be mutter to eat it, even I guess if you did it b'mezid. Fine. But nonetheless, what did we teach? We said that in a situation where you have when it wasn't fully cooked, when you have this food that wasn't fully cooked, we said if you did it by accident, it would be allowed. You'd be allowed to eat it. And if you left it on the fire on purpose, then you would not be allowed to eat it. So it's a kasha both on Rabbi and Rav Yosef, as well as on Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. It's a kasha on Rabbi and Rav Yosef, because Rabbi and Rav Yosef said, either way, whether you did it on purpose or whether you did it by accident, you would be allowed to eat this food that you left on the stove because you didn't do a maaseh. Yet in this brisa, we're saying that if you did it on purpose, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Now, according to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, it's a kasha because Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said if you did it by accident, if you left the food on the stove by accident, he says you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Yet this brisa seems to say you are allowed to eat it. So it's a kasha on both opinions. So b'shlam Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So I understand how I can explain Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Lo kasha, it's no problem. Kan kodem gzera, kan lacher gzera. We're going to explain in a few minutes what this gzera is, but essentially they made a gzera about this exact case. That when you forget food, shelo bishlu kol tzarkan, right? When you forget food, or even maybe you can say shabisho kol tzarko. If it's mistamik v'tovlo, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but forget about it. We're not even talking about that right now, right? So let's say you forget food that isn't bisho kol tzarko, right? On the stove, okay? So initially they said it would be okay because you forgot it, and that's what's going on in this brisa, right? We're saying if you left it there b'shogeg, it would be okay. However, when Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was explaining Rabbi Chia bar Abba as saying that when he says that it makes no difference when it comes to when you forget something on the stove, it means that you would not allow to eat it even though it's b'shogeg. That was after the gezerah when they said that you're not allowed to eat food that you left on the stove by accident. But according to Rabbi and Rav Yosef, who said that you would be allowed to eat this food that you left on the stove by accident, well then, ikodem gezerah kasha mezid. So if we're going to say that Rabbi and Rav Yosef were saying their opinion in explaining Rabbi Chia bar Abba before they made the gezerah that you can't eat food that was left on a stove by accident, well, you still have the problem of the fact that this brisa says that, b'mezid it wouldn't be allowed. And they said that both b'shogeg and b'mezid would be allowed because there's no maaseh. Ila achar gezerah, and if it's after they made the gezerah to say that you cannot eat food that was left on a stove, well then kasha nami shogeg. Well then, in addition to the problem of mazid, you also have the problem of the fact that they're saying that b'shogeg you're allowed to eat it, but the Gezerah said that you're not allowed to eat it. Kasha. Okay, it's a kasha and Rabban Rav Yosef. My Gezerah, what is this Gezerah that we're talking about? Rav Yehuda bar Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda bar Shmuel, Rabbi Abba, Rav Kahana, Rav Betchila, initially, initially they said that if you cooked on Shabbos by accident, yochal, you can eat it. But mezid lo yochal, if you cooked on Shabbos on purpose, you can't eat it. And the same thing applied to if you were to have forgotten something on the stove on Shabbos, you'd be allowed to eat it. Because shochech is like shogeg. However, when it was becoming too prevalent that people would leave things on the stove on purpose and say, oh, we just forgot, well then chazru v'kansu ala shochech, they went and they made a knas, a fine, on even those who really genuinely forgot it on the stove and said that nobody can eat foods that were forgotten on the stove. Okay? That's also assuming, though, that shehiyah is aser be'enu gar ve'enu katum. I don't know that that's necessarily for sure, because we seem to be explaining the Mishnah as saying that shehiyah would be allowed even if it's not gufo ktuma. Okay, Seder. Continues the Gemara. Kasha dab mer ad Rab Meir, kasha dab Yehuda ad Rab Yehuda. 1 second. Do the names of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda ring a similar tone, if that's like a thing? We had them yesterday, in the context of those two stoves that were right next to each other, where they said that they had to be grufo ktuma, and then we had the opinions of Beis Shammai and Basila, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. So, yesterday, Rabbi Meir said that according to Beis Hillel, you can only put hot water on the stove. Over here, he seems to be saying that there's no problem putting both hot water and cooked foods, right, even b'mezid, right, assuming that they're fully cooked. And Rabbi Yehuda yesterday said that you would be allowed, according to Beis Hillel, you'd be allowed to put both hot water and cooked foods, yet over here he's saying that hot water that's completely cooked you can put on the stove, but food that's completely cooked, or you can leave on the stove, right, and food that's completely cooked, you wouldn't be allowed to leave on the stove. So what's the deal? So, Rab Meir lo kasha. The Gemara says, Rabbi Meir is cool, he's good. That yesterday he was talking about lechatchila. Lechatchila, the stove should be grufo ktuma. Lechatchila, you shouldn't be putting, you can only put hot water. Over here it's talking about b'diavad, you forgot to take the thing off the stove. So he's saying it's b'diavad, it's b'seder, so, look, l'maisa you can eat the hot water and the cooked food. Okay, although he does say even b'mezid. Alright, but I guess even b'mezid he still shouldn't do it. But if he did, so he could still eat it, I guess. And Rabbi Yehuda nami lo kasha kam b'gufo ktuma kam b'shena gufo ktuma. Rabbi Yehuda also, yesterday when he was saying that you can eat the water and the cooked foods, well, that was by grufo ktuma. Over here we're not talking about grufo ktuma, and therefore only the hot water, but the cooked foods, it wouldn't be allowed, assuming that it's mistamak v'yafilo. Ibaylu, they asked the kasha, Avar v'shamai, what if he left something on the stove on purpose? Up until now we've been talking about he forgot. What if he did it on purpose? Okay. Mikansur rabbanon olo. Okay. Did the rabbanon say that he wouldn't be allowed to eat it? Okay. I mean, we kind of just said that even if he forgot and he left it on the stove, the rabbanon kind of made a knas and said that you can't eat it. But maybe it's talking about before they made that takana, that gezerah. Okay. So do they make a knas and say that you're not allowed to eat it? So Tashma Amar Shmuel Bar Nasa and Amar B'Chanina, Kishalach Rabbi Yosef Tzipori, that when Rabbi Yosef went to Tzipori, I wonder if this is connected to the story on Daf Lamed Gimel Mebeis, where they said that the Romans exiled Rabbi Yosef to Tzipori because he was quiet when Rabbi Yehuda was praising the Romans. Matzacham and Shenishtu Al Gabe Kira, he found that there was hot water that was left on the stove, V'lo Asar Lahen, and he didn't make it asr for them. Beitzim mitzumakos shenishtahu al gabi kira v'asur lahen. And there were eggs that were left on the fire and, getting raisinier. And he said that it was asur. My lav lo also Shabbos. Mistama was saying it was asur for that Shabbos, i.e., yeah, we do fine you and say if you specifically left food on the fire, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Lo the Shabbos haba. No, I was talking about the coming Shabbos, but that Shabbos it was fine. I.e., if you intentionally leave something on the fire, you would be allowed to eat it. Michlal debeitzim mitzumakos mitstamkos v'yafela and ninu. So does that imply that eggs that you leave on the fire they get better and better? Yeah, it does. Dam Rav Chaim bar Chanina said Rav Chaim bar Chanina pam achas nesarachti ani v'Rebbe l'makom echad. One time, me and Rebbe were guests somewhere. V'aviu l'fanenu beitzim mitzumakos. And they brought, and this wasn't on Shabbos, it was during the week, and they brought us, these very slow cooked eggs, I guess. They were like crab apples, and they were really, really good, and we ate them all. Okay. Basil om af machzirin. Okay, Basil says you can even return something to the stove. I think I got stuck on this, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half. I could not figure out what the heck was going on in this part. But I have mahalach now. I have mahalach. And it's not so hard. Once you figure it out. I think I figured it out. I guess we'll find out. So Basil says, af machzirin. You're allowed to return something to the stove. Now, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like this. That, it's talking about where when Shabbos came in, the pot was inside of the stove, okay? It was grufa uktuma, okay? It was inside of the stove, okay? And therefore it was being insulated with whatever heat was inside over there, but it was grufa uktuma, so it wasn't mosif hevel, so it was basically hatmana b'davar she'ena mosif hevel from before Shabbos. And then on Shabbos, you take it out of the stove, and you're putting it back inside of the stove. And the question is, so Basil says that you're allowed to put it back in, but the question is, is it so simple? And that's what we're going to be figuring out over here, right? But it's talking about where you had the pot inside of the stove from before Shabbos, and now you want to put it back in the stove on Shabbos. The reason why I'm understanding it this way is because Rashi is talking about Hatmana, and we're going to see all sorts of details now about returning things, which would really only be, because if you're just putting it back on top of the stove, what's the problem? Why can't I, just put something on top of a stove that is, like, warm? It's not cooking it. Like, what's the problem? So Rashi starts talking about Hatmana, right? It only becomes a problem if we have to start worrying about, are you allowed to put it, insulate it on Shabbos? And insulating, I think, is only going to be when you're putting it inside of the stove. And there were all sorts of other kashas that I was, trying to figure out. But I think that this mahalach makes sense. Amar of Sheshes, says of Sheshes, so Divra Omer, machzirin afilu b'Shabbos. So according to the man, the Amar who says, so according to basically Beis Hillel, who says that you're allowed to be machzir, that if you take something off the stove, you're allowed to put it back by the stove. So that's afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos morning, right? Even during Shabbos day. And Rashi explains, because I might have thought that, okay, I get that if I take something out of the stove on Friday night, I could put it back, because clearly my intention was I'm going to take it off the stove right now. Whatever I don't eat, I'm going to be putting back on the stove so I can have it for tomorrow. However, and therefore it would all be the same hatmana, kilu. And that's the key point there. That when you put the pot inside of the stove before Shabbos, okay, and then it was already grufa uktuma, and therefore it was being insulated inside the stove b'davar she'eno mosif hevel. It's just regular atmana, and therefore it's mutter to do that before Shabbos, but not on Shabbos, and that's also important. And when you take the pot out of the stove, so clearly your intention is that you're going to be putting it back so you can eat whatever's left over tomorrow. So therefore, you can rely on the initial hatmana, the initial insulation when you put it in the stove from before Shabbos. However, I may have thought that on Shabbos, if I take the pot out of the stove, So I'm going to eat it now. I'm done. What am I going to save it for tomorrow? It's for Shabbos. So I don't have intention to put it back. And therefore, when I put the pot back in the stove on Shabbos, it would be a new hatmana, and you can't do hatmana on Shabbos. So now we're saying machzirun afilu b'Shabbos. No, if you say that you can return it even on Shabbos, and we assume that your intention is to put it back, and that it's not a new hatmana, it's still the same hatmana from yesterday, and you're just continuing it. And even Rabbi Oshaya says you can return something to the stove even on Shabbos. That one time we were standing in front of Reb Chia Rabbah, and we brought him a kettle of water from the first floor to the second, from the first level to the second level. We poured him this hot water, and we returned it back to the stove where it was, and he didn't tell us anything. Okay? And I guess the assumption being putting it inside the stove. Otherwise it wouldn't really be a good proof, I think. Amar Rab Zrika, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Tadoi. So it says Rabbi Zrika in the name of Rabbi Abba and the name of Rabbi Tadoi. Lo shanu ela she'odan biyado. Aha. Now this is only if the thing that you're taking out of the stove is still in your hand. But if you put it down on the ground, it wouldn't be allowed. And this is why there's like that thing, like when people take like the cholent out of the crock pot, let's say on Friday night, because they want to take some, then put it back for tomorrow, put the thing back on for tomorrow, so they keep their hand on it. I assume it's based on this. Because that's the way that, that you're, keeping your intention, of, the initial hatmana. Okay? Rabbi Ami, says Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Tadai, David the guy Avad. So Rabbi Ami says, look, Rabbi Tadai was a das yachid. This whole thing about putting your hand on it and keeping your hand on it, you don't have to worry about it. Rather, this is what Rabbi Chia said, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, even if you put it on the ground, it's fine. Pligi, but Rav Dimi, Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, right, so there's Machlokes Rav Dimi and Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, both of them are claiming to be explaining Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Amrei Chad, one of them said, they said, Chad Amar Oden biyado mutter agabi karka. So one of them said, but Tavar Mishmed Rabbi Elazar Amrei. Okay, fine. Chad Amar Oden biyado mutter. So one of them said no, yeah, like Rab Tadoi, that you have to keep your hand on it, and if you put it down on the ground, it would be aser. The other one says that even if you put it down on the ground, right, you would take something out of the stove, put it down on the ground, it would still be fine. Amar Chizkiya Mishmei Abai, said Chizkiya in the name of Abai, Hadu Amart Oden biyado mutter, that which you said, that as long as it remains in your hand, it's mutter. That's only as long as his intention is to put it back. But if he, took it out of the stove, even though his hand is still on it, if he wasn't intending to put it back into the stove, so then it would be aser. Implying that if you would put it down on the ground, right, and take your hand off of it, well then even if your intention was to put it back into the stove, it would be aser. Those who say Amar Chizkiya Mishmei Abai, that Chizkiya said in the name of Abai, Hada Amart Agabe Karka Aser, then when we said that you're not allowed to put it on the ground, Lo Amar and Ela Shein Daitu Lachzir, that's only as long as he doesn't have any intention of putting it back in the stove. But if he intended to put the pot back in the stove, mutter. Implying that if he's still keeping his hand on it, even though his intention is not to put it back in the oven, in the stove, it would still be fine. But Rabbi Yirmiyah asked, Tilan b'makol mao, what if instead of putting it down on the ground or holding it in your hand, you hung it on some kind of a staff, like a stick? What if instead of putting it on the ground, you put it on a bed? Mao. By Ravashi asked, Pinan mimakom l'makom mao, mimechem l'mechem mao. Well, what if you let's say remove the content from one pot to another pot and then put that pot back in the stove? Teku. I guess in all these questions we don't have an answer. Alright, new Mishnah. Tana shesiku b'kashav gvava. Lo yitain bein mitocho bein me'agabav. Oh. So now, okay, so up until now we've been talking about a kirayim, okay? Now, in this Mishnah we're going to introduce two more concepts. One of them is a tanur, and one of them is a kupach. So, a kirayim we've been defining as a stove. And now, once we get into this Mishnah already, the distinctions between different kinds of stoves starts actually to become apparent. And so a kirayim, a kira that we've been talking about, that we've been discussing until now, is essentially a stove that has enough room to put two pots on it. And it's actually, I'm going to draw a diagram of it, but it's actually more of like a rectangle where you could put two pots on it. And then there's this kupach thing, which is basically a stove that's enough for to put one pot on it, and that's more of like a cube. And then the oven would actually be, so up until now, I was assuming, really until I started realizing this now, but I was assuming that the stove was basically like the oven, that it was like this kind of cone shape that you clip off the top. But that's actually the oven. The oven is this cone shape that you clip off the top. And so that's the oven. Then you have the kupach, which is like a cube, where you could put one pot, and then you have the stove, the kirayim, which is like almost like a rectangle, like twice the length or width or whatever of a kupach, and there you could put two stoves. So now we're going to be talking about an oven and a kupach. So an oven, the thing with the oven is that it retains heat better than the stove because of its shape. It gets thinner as it goes up, so it retains heat better. So the Mishnah says, Tanur shisiku b'kashuv gvava. So when you have an oven, and even though you've fueled the oven with kashuv gvava, which is this weaker fuels, nonetheless, because the oven is able to retain heat better, so lo yitain bein mitocho bein me'agabav. You can't put a pot either inside of it or on top of it because it's going to be a stronger source of heat. It's going to, create more heat. Kupach, whereas this sort of single burner kind of stove, this cube stove, shisiku b'kashuv gvava, that you fueled with straw or rakings, hareza kichirayim. So then we treat it like a stove, in that, depending on how you learn the previous Mishnah, but basically, you could put things on top of it, inside of it, whatever it might be. If it's before Shabbos, but basically it's more meko, right? However, when it comes to, but if you would light this kupach, fuel it with this gefes or with wood, which are stronger heat, so then we treat it like a tanur. And the assumption, my understanding being, and also from the Gemara, basically what does it mean that if you light this kupach with begefes uve'etzim, it's like an oven? So we said that by an oven, even if you fuel the oven with kashuv v'gvava, with these weaker fuels, so because the oven retains heat better, so even though it's kashuv v'gvava, you still may not put a pot either on top of it or inside of it. And now we know that if you have gefes ve'etzim and it's grufo ktuma, so then it's basically in the same category as kashuv v'gvava. Now, when it comes to a kirayim, kashuv ugvava or gefes ve'etzim that are grufo ktuma, basically you can put stuff on top of it, right? Or even inside of it, if it's before Shabbos. So that would be allowed. However, by an oven, it wouldn't be allowed. Now we're saying that a kupach, if you're putting gefes and eitzim, it's going to be like a tanur. I assume the assumption being that even if it's grufo ktuma, it would still not be allowed, as opposed to in a kirayim, if it's grufo ktuma, then it would be okay. Fine. So let's look at the Gemara. Tanur shisiku. So we said, you have this oven that you fueled. So Savar of Yosef lemeimar tocho mamish, agabav mamish, aval lismoch shapir dami. So if Yosef wants to say that when it comes to an oven, so the Mishnah said that if you fuel this oven, with kasher v'kvava, you still may not put anything on top of it or inside of it, even though it's only kasher v'kvava. So now Rav Yosef wants to say, sure, you can't put anything on top of it or inside of it, but you could put something next to it and let it sort of, absorb some of the heat that way. Eis ve'abai, but Abai asks a kasha under Rav Yosef. Because our Mishnah says, kupach shisiku b'kasher v'kvava. If you have a kupach, this one burner stove, that you fuel with kasher v'kvava, which are weaker, hareu kechirayim. So we can treat it like a kirayim, and you could put things on top of it, inside of it, whatever. Begefes uve'etzim. However, if you fuel the kupach with gefes or with eitzim, hareu ketaner ve'aser. So then we treat it like an oven, the assumption being that we're going to treat it more strictly, and it's going to be forbidden. Hakachira shari, which implies that if you would have done the same thing in a kira, it would be permitted. So now we have to figure out what we're talking about. B'mai skinam, what are we talking about? Now, ilema al gabav uvimai, and if we're talking about putting it on top of this kupach, ilema kishe eino grufa v'katum, and if we're talking about where it's not grufa uktuma, so basically, so if we're saying that if you have this kupach and you're fueling it with gefes and eitzim, which are stronger fuels, and it's not grufa uktuma, i.e. it's mamis as strong as it gets, and we're saying that we're treating it like an oven to say that it's aser, the implication being that if it were a stove, it would be mutter, but elekira ki'ena grufa uktuma agabav mishari, but you wouldn't be able to put something on top of a kira that is fueled with gefes and eitzim that are about as strong as you get, that they're not grufa uktuma. So elalav lismoch. Rather, so since it can't be talking about putting it on top of the kupach, it must be talking about putting it next to it. Vikatani hareu katana ve'asir. And we're saying that if you have this kupach that you fuel with gefes and eitzim, it's and we're assuming that we're putting it next to it, and we're saying that by an oven it would be aser, but by a stove it would be mutter. V'katani hareu katana ve'asir, and we're saying that it's like a tanur in that it would be aser even though you're only putting it next to it. That is the kasha that Abaye wants to ask on Rav Yosef. He says, Rav Yosef, how can you say that putting a pot next to an oven would be permitted from the fact that we say that if you fuel a kupach with gefes and eitzim, it's like a tanur? It must be talking about when you're putting something next to the kupach, and we're saying that it's like a tanur in that it's asur. Amravada barahava, no, hacha bekupach garu v'katum v'tanur gufa uktuma askina. No. Here we're talking about a kupach that is grufa uktuma, and what we're saying is that it would be similar to an oven in that even an oven that was fueled with eitzim and gefes, even though it's grufa uktuma, it would still be aser because it retains the heat so much better. Hareu ketanu dafagav degar v'katum al gabav aser. Right, that an oven, even though it's grufa uktuma, you still may not put something on top of it. The kechira ki grufa uktuma shapidami. Whereas if you would compare it, if you would say that this kupach is like a kira, well, a kira, if it's grufa uktuma, you would be allowed to put something on top of it. So that is what's going on. Okay. Tanakavasa that Abaye, we have a brisa that supports Abaye's opinion, which is that by a tanur you would not be allowed to put something next to it. Tanur shisiku b'kashu v'gvava. If you have an oven that was fueled with kash and gvava, ein somchin lo. There you go. That an oven that you fuel with kashu gvava, nonetheless you may not put something next to it. Vein tzarich lomer al gabav, and certainly you wouldn't be able to put anything on top of it. Vein tzarich lomer l'socho, and certainly you wouldn't be able to put anything inside of it. Vein tzarich lomer b'gefes uve'etzim, and certainly you wouldn't be able to fuel it and do any of these things with gefes and eitzim, which are stronger. I guess the assumption being where it's not grufa uktuma. Kupach, and this one burner stove, shisiku b'kashu v'gvava, that you fueled it with straw or with rakings, somchin lo, you may put something next to it. And the Agos Agra changed this to vinos ninagabav, and you may put stuff on top of it, because we compare it to a kirayim. However, begefes uve'etzim, if you fuel it with the sesame leftovers and wood, ein somchin lo, then you wouldn't be able to put anything next to it. So there you go. There's a brayso that supports Abaye's opinion that you may not, put a pot next to an oven, even though it's only kashu gvava. Amrle Ravacha B'Rava Ravashi. So Ravacha B'Rava said to Ravashi, "Hi kupach echidami. What is the deal with this kupach thing? I don't get it. Ikechira dami afilu begefes uvetzim nami. I don't get it. If this kupach thing is like a kira, well then even with gefes and eitzim, as Rashi points out, when it's grufa uktuma, so then it would be permitted. Iketaner. And if we treat this kupach like an oven, well then, right, ketaner dami. So afilu bekashu v'gvava nami lo. Right, so then even when you fuel it with kashu gvava, it shouldn't be allowed. So what's the deal? So amalei nafish havale midikira v'zutar havale miditaner. So Ravashi answered Ravacha B'Rava that it's kind of in the middle. It retains heat better than a kira, but not quite as well as an oven, and therefore it's kind of in between. So when it comes to kashu gvava, it's similar to a kira. When it comes to gefes ve'etzim, it's similar to a toner. Heichidami kupach, heichidami kira. Now, as I mentioned earlier in explaining the Mishnah, what exactly is a kupach versus a kira? Amr Yossi bar Chanina, kupach makom shvisas kedera achas, kira makom shvisas shtei kederos. That a kupach is, has enough room for one pot, whereas a kira has enough room for two pots. Amar Abaye, said Abaye, v'tema Rabbi Yirmiyah, afana nami tanina. We also have a Mishnah that says, kira shenechlika leorka tehora lirochba tamea. That when it comes to, it's a Mishnah in Kalim, and it says that if you have a stove that is split lengthwise, well then it would be tahora. If it was tameh, it would become tahora, because by splitting it lengthwise, i.e. slicing in half both of these stoves, both areas where you can put a pot, well now you can't put a pot anywhere, and it's unusable, and now the kli becomes tahor. However, if you were to split it in half sort of widthwise, so now you basically have two stoves instead of one stove with two places for pots, well then that's fine, right? Oh, well, what do you mean that's fine? What does fine mean? Well, then it would remain tameh, because you can still use these two stoves individually. So we see that it's a place for two stoves, as opposed to kupach ben l'orko ben l'roch botar. Whereas a kupach, a one burner stove, since it's just a cube, whether you cut it in half lengthwise or widthwise, it's really the same thing, and you're going to be ruining the stove, because you won't be able to put anything on it anymore because it's broken. There's no place to put any stoves anymore, so any pots anymore. So therefore, it would be tahor at this point. Okay, that was Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Shabbos. Just going to do like a really super quick recap of the Daf, not detailed at all. Sorry. Basically, we started out talking about what if you forget a pot on the fire, right? So assuming that you are not allowed, assuming according to the opinions that you wouldn't be allowed to have shehiyah with a pot that is not grufa uktuma, so then what happens if you forget it by accident? Can you eat the food or not? Okay, then we talked about the opinion of Beis Hillel. How do you do chazara? Do you have to keep your hand on it? Do you not have to keep your hand on it? Then we got this new Mishnah of what about an oven and a kupach? What's the differences between an oven versus a kupach versus a kirayim? Kirayim is enough place for two pots. Kupach is enough place for one pot. And an oven is basically kind of like a cone kind of shape with the top clipped off. When it comes to a kupach, you see, when it comes to an oven, if you put kash and gvava in, even though those are weaker fuels, if you put them in an oven, you still are not going to be able to put anything on top of it or inside of it or apparently even next to it, because it retains heat much more stronger. When it comes to a kirayim, that's where it's the most makil because it's kind of bigger. It's enough room for 2 pots, and therefore even with eitzim and gefes that are grufa and ketuma, you could still put pots on it. Whereas this kupach, because it's smaller, it's only big enough for 1 pot. It's kind of in between. Right? As the Gemara says that it retains heat better than a stove, a kirayim, but not quite as well as an oven. And therefore, with kash and gvava, it'll be like a kirayim. But once you have gefes and eitzim, it'll be like a tanner, like an oven. So awesome. The implication being that even if it is grufa or ketuma, it still wouldn't be allowed. All right. Thanks, everyone. Peace.